Welcome to the Big Facts Show. This is Mark Ward. I don't got Laz with me today, but I do have a special guest. We're going to be joined by journalist Gary Suarez. His recent bylines include Forbes, Entertainment Weekly, Rolling Stone, Vibe, Vice. He has a long history in hip-hop journalism. I became familiar with him from this email newsletter he's publishing called Cabbages, which has some of the most thought-provoking journalism in hip-hop today. Some of the outlooks he takes on subjects are truly unique, and he's committed to breaking and exposing artists that might not have had the platform from the traditional media outlets. So no further ado, let's get into the episode, and make sure to follow, like, and review this show wherever you get your podcasts at.
Bang, 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 bang. I'm BK like Bally's, John Sally's, rims beat deuce, guns beat Bruce, so large, I'm hard, no Paul Mooney, hold on groupie, 2 foot Ben stack, tight.
All right, how you doing today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. You know, I became familiar with you from your newsletter, and I follow you on Instagram, but what should I refer to you as?
I mean, you just call me Gary. Gary's fine. Yeah.
I'm Mark. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And, you know, like I said, I found out about you through your newsletter, which I feel is truly like one of the most thought-provoking reads that's going on right now in hip-hop journalism. Can you tell me a little bit about that and some of your most popular, I guess, editions and how you come up with the topics?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just thank you. I appreciate the love. I mean, it's nice that I get that kind of response. For me, it's just about, I started this newsletter, Cabbages, because I've been writing about music, particularly hip hop, for a while now. And there's a lot of times where I get emails or reach out on social from artists or publicists for independent artists and say, how do we get coverage? And it's hard. It's hard to pitch these people to bigger outlets. You know, it's hard to get like interviews and stuff. So I've been doing this long enough. So I was like, I know all these people. I'm just going to do it myself. And so that's kind of how I started that out. And the way that I frame each issue is there's like an essay that starts it. There's like a little article that starts it just to get you on that. So like I try to bring people in because the goal is I want people to learn about these artists and what they're doing, these underground and indie artists and hip hop, you know, rappers, producers who are doing interesting things that aren't getting attention from like Complex or Pitchfork, or even some of like even more niche hip hop blogs aren't even covering some of these people. So I'm trying to get them some love. So I usually try to pick a topic that's gonna get people going. So like I'll talk about, you know, why Def Jam missed the Griselda wave, right? You know, or I'll do a piece like, okay, Jay-Z isn't a great album artist, you know, and sometimes it's like you do a thing like that and like someone goes, well, wait, what do you mean? But then you lure them in and you get people to kind of read. And it's not like I'm just doing it for the sake of pissing people off. Like I'm trying to get them to hear my point. But like you bring someone in with something interesting and whether they like your opinion or agree with you or not, they might stay on to read like what else you want to recommend to them. And if I could help turn somebody on to an artist because they wanted to get mad about something I said about Nas, you know, I'm happy to do it, you know.
That's smart. I never thought of it like that. So what would have been some of your more, let's say, traffic generating topics?
I mean, it's like, I got a lot on a piece I did about Run the Jewels. I've been writing, like I said, I've been writing for a long time. And I remember when Run the Jewels came up, and, you know, I remember the LP in the Def Jukes days. I remember Killer Mike back in the Dungeon Family days. Right. And so it's just like, I always had a hard time with Run the Jewels. I always felt like Run the Jewels was kind of doing this thing that felt weirdly nostalgic in a way where like these were two artists who didn't feel like nostalgia artists to me. Like Killer Mike is an amazing MC. LP is like a visionary producer. So like I kind of wrote this piece as just kind of like my understanding of, you know, all 4 Run the Jewels albums and like my relationship as a critic with that. And that got a lot of attention because it was like right after Run the Jewels 4 came out and people were looking for stuff on it. And I just kind of went in and just was like, I don't quite understand it. And like, I feel like this is a duo that could be doing even greater things. And so that approach appealed to some people because it was just like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't like them. I'm not saying that like that they're whack. I'm saying that consider that maybe, you know, this is not the best version of either of those people. Maybe like LP's work on like Cannibal Ox, like on Cold Vein, just like vastly greater record than any of the Run the Jewels. And so some people are going to agree, some people are going to disagree, but that was the kind of piece that brings people in.
I'm not familiar with that. What's the name of that record?
So Cannibal Ox is the Cold Vein is like 2001, great New York hip hop, real underground stuff, but like hugely influential. Like a lot of the stuff that's happened in New York underground, you know, there's a lot of stuff that came out of that scene. You know,
yeah, man, I've heard of Rusty Jux. I've never heard them, to be honest with you. I mean, to be honest with you, Run the Jewels, like you know, I'm more from the Southern.
Mm-hmm.
So like Killer Mike introduced me to LP, but I get what you mean. Like, you know, I'm from DC, and I mean, like something similar to that to me is I remember I was disappointed in Method Man's first album, not because I thought it was bad, but because I thought it could have been better.
No, see, that's the kind of thing too. It's like when you have high expectations of somebody, it's like, look, I'm from Queens. I'm born and raised in Queens. I lived here my whole life. And so my biases are always New York stuff. Now, I also grew up basically alongside hip hop. Like it's been part of my life because it's just what's been the sound here for my entire life. And so it's like, I remember that Method Man record, and I remember Takal just being like, okay, this is not what I signed up for. Like, you know, Enter the Wu-Tang, you know, 36 Chambers, like that's a record where you're just like, you expect him to be the biggest rap star in the world off of that. You expect him to be huge. And it's like, he does that record, you go, okay, Raekwon eats his lunch on Cuban Links, you know? Yeah. And then a few years later, you get, you know, Ghostface, who started off like good and then did Supreme Clientele, which is, in my view, like the greatest hip hop album ever. And it's just like he became the guy. And if you had looked purely in 1993 terms, you never would have thought that Ghostface Killer was going to be like the best of the bunch. So it's interesting to kind of see these artists who you care about, who you get behind, and then you watch their path and watch their career. And you go like, oh, okay, you know, maybe they go someplace interesting, maybe they don't. Like, I still am waiting for Method Man to do like a great solo album. I think he's done some good stuff with Redman. I'm still waiting for him to do like a great solo album. But I'm sure you got plenty of records.
Conway album? I mean, that new Conway song?
I mean, that's a great example. I feel like as where he's at right now, like he's the kind of person who could work credibly with a Conway, who could work credibly with like West Side Gun and a lot of these other like rappers over 40, because like he's got his voice only got better, and he's somebody who could choose consistently doing those features.
And I'm saying, did you hear the, I think it's called Lemon Drop, maybe?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's called Lemon, right? Yeah.
I thought that was like a particularly strong verse.
It was a good verse for him. Like, and it's just like, it's nice to see. I'm sure, you know, he drops verses here and there, and I have high hopes for what he's going to be doing at some point. I feel like if he works with the right producer at some point, he could make one of those like late career defining records. He could make a record that makes you go, oh, wait, like, could you imagine if you get like a Method Man, you get him together with like Alchemist, you get him with somebody who understands, you know, what it means to work with that artist and to make music that works with that artist. I feel like you could get something incredible out of him, you know?
Well, I mean, Quincy Jones said he didn't even understand how to make music until he was 50. And I feel we haven't got the hip hop example of that yet. I feel like the great 50-year-old plus hip hop album is still to come, or at least the first one. I'm sure there'll be many after a while, you know, as the genre ages.
I think that's absolutely right. Look, we're finally at a point where like an artist could be over 30 and still be relevant. Like, it's amazing how long we went not allowing like the greats to do their thing. And eventually it's just like after you got to past a certain age, you stopped being what people cared about. And that was just crazy to me. Like, it doesn't make sense because the fans get older. It's like, if I'm happy to go see some of these guys in concert, you know, go see them play shows, whether it's a club show or a theater or even like a festival. I'm happy to see them, but it's like, they're not just there to play their old stuff. I want to hear some of these people do that album. I want to hear that amazing record.
Some people age into mediocrity though.
Well, that's the thing, because I've talked to some people about that. It's interesting. Like, you know, like I talked to people like Kool Keith. I've talked to a lot of different rappers who were like over the age of 40. And a lot of the things that I hear from these people is that artists expect things to stay the way they was. They want people to, You know, they want the industry to stay the same. They want to make the same kind of thing. And it's like, if they're not willing to, I'm not saying try to sound like the sound of today, try to sound like what like some SoundCloud rapper at 19 is trying to do, but like not be willing to expand their horizons, work with a different kind of producer, work with a different kind of thing, and work on their craft as an MC. You know, you're not going to get great records. You might get a good feature here and there, but you're not going to get great records.
Well, who do you think's made some particularly strong later career music?
I mean, I think if you compare somebody like Rick Ross to what he did in the beginning to what he does now,
like the Eric Sermon beginning.
Yeah. If you go, I go way back. Like, but if you talk about like, if you think about like when Rick Ross broke out, and you think about, you know, with Hustle and all that, like if you go out with that, it's like nobody expected him to be the kind of guy who was going to drop bars, who's going to drop really interesting stuff. And his career changed over time, and like what he did over like Justice League and all those other guys' tracks, you know. And now he's the kind of guy who gets on like a Griselda project, and you're like, oh, actually that's amazing. Like I need to run that back because I actually need to pay attention to those references. You know, that's what's interesting to me, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's somebody who now in his 40s is making some of the best music of his career. It might not be the most commercially successful, but I think it's some of the best music of his career.
Those two aren't always necessarily the same thing, huh, brother?
Exactly.
So let me ask you something about, like you said about the newsletter. Then it gets to the part where you put the spotlight on up and coming artists. You know, a lot of people I like the first time, you know, I heard of them, producers like you got a real good ear for up and coming producers. But anyway, TLDR, where do you find all this stuff? Like, there's very few people. I'm not trying to be pretentious, but there's very few people that they talk about a rapper, and I've never even heard of them, remotely heard of them, and it's just like, how?
Yeah, it's a hard thing because like you're not seeing it in other places. Like I've you know, I spent a lot of time on Twitter especially. And so I've developed relationships with different artists and different publicists. So people will turn me on and say, oh, you got to hear my boy. You got to hear what he's doing. Or like, I'll get an email from a publicist who I trust. Who'll say like, oh, I think this will be up your alley. And then others is just like, you know, I benefit from patience in that I go and I search for things. Like you go on Bandcamp and you look up things and you see where things go and you see what those people are doing. You see a record, you see, okay, that person's featured on it. You've never heard that person before. So you jump to see what they're doing. And maybe if you follow that like trail of breadcrumbs down for a bit, you might find somebody really amazing in there.
I feel you. I used to go on like indie live mixtapes and put most searched ever or most something. And the person I didn't hear of, I'd be like, let me see what that, yeah.
Yeah, like back in the day, and I mean back in the day, sorry, I shouldn't even say that. Like back in the day, like 2013, is like I go on DatPiff and you just start searching and exploring over there, and you'd find some like mixtape that wasn't on the front page, but you might find something interesting and be like, you just look by date, what came out in the past 30 days, and like what's been popular in the past 60 days, stuff like that, and you come across something that maybe might be like, it might mean something regionally, but you haven't heard it.
Right.
Like, there's an artist from a place that you're not as familiar with, and you get wise to it. You know, that happened with a lot of trap stuff. That happened with a lot of drill stuff back then too. It's just
Angel Hayes in 2003. You remember Angel Hayes?
Exactly. Yeah, Angel Hayes. Yeah, I think she has me blocked on Twitter. But a lot of people do, so it's all right. Because I shit talk, and that gets me in trouble sometimes. But no, it's one of those things like you find people in those ways, and I think there's still ways to do it now. You know, I benefit from the fact that I talk to a lot of good people, and they try to turn me on to stuff. And publicists now.
Clarify shit talk. Do you mean like voice your honest opinion?
Yes, that's what it is. I think it's not. That's I guess shit talk is kind of playing it down. But like the thing is that if I don't like something, I say I don't like it. You know, I've been writing for nearly 20 years. I've been writing for pay for the past 10 essentially, and like. Pay meaning like publications pay me. Like that way. Like I go and I write for a place, and they pay me to write the work. But I've never been a staffer anywhere. I never worked on staff someplace. So like, gotcha. I never had to be like, oh, I got to be nice to Drake, because if I'm not nice to Drake, then, my editor is going to get shunned when he gets that up, and that opportunity to speak Drake comes through, no,
gotcha, yeah.
I've been able to say whatever I want. And the beauty of social media is just being able to say it. Now, like, I don't try to do it in a disrespectful way. Like, I'm not trying to be like, talk about somebody personally. I'm not trying to do anything really all that mean, but if I'm not feeling this record, or I feel like, that's a terrible line, or you can't pick beats,
Who are you wrong about?
I think it's funny because like that's a good question. It's funny because you do end up being wrong. I feel like I got turned off by like Azalea Banks for a long time. I was like really just like I felt like I kind of got that distraction between the personality and what she was saying to take away from stuff. And and she said some things about like she said some things about so many people. And like for me, she said some stuff that was like about Latinos I had a real problem with, and that obviously is going to stick with me as a Latino. But I talked to this producer recently for the newsletter, this guy Machine Drum. Machine Drum produced a lot of her stuff during those like the Broke with Expensive Taste days and Fantasy and like those early records that really gained her fans. And talking to him, I was like, I need to go back and listen because I really like his work. He did a new album. He has like Freddie Gibbs on his most recent album. He has Father on his most recent album.
Good musicians, like good music.
Yeah, so I went back. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and listen to those records. And it's like, because this is a great beat maker. This guy was an amazing producer. And I went back and listened. I'm like, okay, I might not agree with her on some stuff. And sometimes that personality gets in the way. But like the reality was like, she did some great work on those projects. Like she did amazing work on some interesting beats. And that's really my forte. It's just where someone is just doing their best work with a great producer.
What about the other direction? Like for instance, I was spectacularly wrong about the viability of Young Chris from State Property. You couldn't have told me that he wasn't going to at least have like 1-2 platinum song, if not in like a gold album back when, that meant something a little different than it does now.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the interesting thing because like it's not even about a decline in quality per se, but just about when you see somebody who you really get behind and you don't see them either do their best work or if you don't see like people show them love. Like I love Freeway. Like I was a big Rockefeller fan. Like I love Freeway. I thought he was doing amazing. That State Property record is still an incredible record to me. And it's just like, I'm waiting for another Freeway project that's going to get me like hands in the air excited. Like, I love.
You ain't like the Jake One album like that?
No, I liked it.
Dollar Bill thing.
I liked it, but it's been a while. Like I'm waiting to see what he's going to be doing because just like, I feel like he's somebody who could do an incredible project. And it's like if he's doing a project and I go, I liked it. Like I liked it isn't enough for me to like keep on with somebody. Like if I just keep liking it, then it's like, well,
you might want to revisit that Jake One thing, but I feel I might. Freeway need to get with like it's got to be somebody that understand them like even like the State Property like Sparks was like that like the few beats that it was like somebody understood I guess how to tune it to their cadence and then like allow his ideas to evolve over the song because sometimes it takes him a long time to get to the point I guess he had a problem with like he had record contracts and then you have executives that be like you gotta be on this kind of beat and he really didn't need to be on no kind of beat. Like the beat kind of needed to be on him.
Yeah, he did that second album for Rockefeller, and that seemed like the classic example. I thought it was a really good record. And
that's
with
like the Big Spender.
I think so. What was it? 2005 maybe. He did that record,
and like the Rockefeller, but
Rockefeller. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so like it was a difference. Like clearly, it's like they're trying to find a way to make him more commercial. And I thought there was some good stuff on that record. Don't get me wrong, but it was just like after his debut and after State Property, you're just like, okay.
How about Beanie? Did you feel that way about the second Beanie?
Beanie to me is just a tragic hero. Like I always feel like Beanie is a great and. I'm always happy.
I think the first one's hands down classic.
Oh, it is 100%. We agree. My issue is that, he's had so much difficulty in his life and he's gone through so much that it has prevented him from pursuing his career in the way that he rightfully deserves to. So I'm not disappointed by him in the slightest. I'm always happy to hear him. And every time, those rare times you hear him and does a feature somewhere, it is a joy to hear his voice.
Now, I was just curious about the second. I feel the second album's like criminally underrated. No, I don't think it gets its just due. Like, everybody talks about the State Property Funk Flex Takeover, right? Mm-hmm. And most of those verses is from the second album. And I don't know. Like, I find myself as I go back, I listen to the second one almost as much as the first.
No, I agree. And for me, like, I'll go back to, what was it, The Becoming, which one has Feel It in the Air? Like that one to me is just like, that song hits me so hard. And like, I just like knowing that he could do an album and do a track like that and like just like set it off that way is incredible to me. You know, so I still think, like, we talk about artists, as like we were talking before, we talk about an artist, you know, doing something later in their career, doing something when they're a bit older. He's somebody who, in the right situation, I think it can make the kind of record that just will touch a lot of people in a very real way.
I mean, you know, since you know publicists and insiders, you know, there probably already has been that album. It was just written for a 15-year-old.
Well, that's the thing, and then it's like a great producer doesn't necessarily get the link up. You know, doesn't necessarily get to work with that person. You know, because you know whether they're considered hot at the moment or not. You know, it's interesting to see who gets the attention. Like right now, Hit Boy has gotten like these plum features. He's doing entire albums with people like Nas and people like Benny. You know, and it's just like, this is now his moment again. He's kind of had this moment to come back around. But like, for how many years was he like? You know, nobody would have done a full project with him. And it's just like, you think about how these careers go and how the industry does this. I think it's just like, I mean, he was getting placements, but like you have this situation.
Huge placements.
Yeah, huge placements. But you think about the situation where just like, well, why didn't somebody think that he was worth doing an entire album with? You know, why did somebody think that he was somebody who should be like executive producing entire albums? It's like, you know, what's it? I'm trying to think of somebody else who I was thinking of recently who
Heatmakers. It was crazy to me that there was like this 2-decade gap between Diplomatic Immunity and like, why didn't you probably could have got a Heatmaker beat for like 1,500 in 2009.
What's crazy is when the Purple Haze 2 project comes out,
right?
And it's like what 90% Heatmakers beats, and it's like Cameron sounds amazing, and these beats are perfect.
Right?
And you sit there going like, how many people would have shined over some of these beats?
They crit.
I mean, it's insane to me how that goes, but that's just the way it is. And, you know, like when I'm looking at stuff now, like I see some of these younger producers who were inspired by that. Like there's this guy from the Bronx, Spanish Ran, who is one of my favorite producers of the year. He's done some amazing projects working. He usually does, it's kind of like he does him and an MC, and like he's done with a couple different people. Blue is another guy from the Bronx who he's worked with as an MC, and like
Spanish Ran and Blue.
Yeah,
they got a good album.
They got 2 good albums this year, 2 incredible albums this year. They're some of my favorite of the year, and like you can hear that sound in what he's doing. You can hear that influence of what was going on in the Dipset days. You know, it's not a ripoff of it by any stretch of the imagination. It's just like it's
like Houston to UGK.
Exactly. Like if you grew up in that system, you hear it, and then it just becomes part of your experience. And as a producer, like you can absorb that and make it your own. And that's exactly what he's doing. You know, I think he's doing incredible work on that front. And so like, that's the joy for me, is to kind of be somebody who's been, you know, with this music for so long and hear how a new generation of producer could be influenced by the artists and producers who came before.
So you look for destination producers almost.
I mean, if you find a producer whose sound you connect with, you want to hear everything by that producer. You know, I know that a lot of people.
I'm too wary of the whack rapper buying a beat from him, though.
No, I mean, that's a good look. There's always that situation. There's always the risk of it. But what happens is when you find an artist who's not as prominent yet, then they're working with people who they fuck with. They're working with people who they like.
Genuinely, but like,
they're not making like a ton of money at that point.
Right.
So it's just like, I'm gonna work with someone who's nice, and I'm not gonna work with somebody who's whack. Like I'll give somebody a beat, you know, maybe, but they're not getting asked for those beats yet. So you find somebody, you know, I'm not saying you find somebody who's in obscurity, but you find somebody who's hungry but talented and is working with somebody else who is hungry but talented. You're gonna find amazing people left and right. And then also you gotta trust some of these producers who have an ear for voice.
Are you familiar with Honorable C Note?
Yeah, Honorable C Note, amazing.
Do you consider him on that level of?
You know, it's something where like I heard him on so many kind of classic trap mixtapes that like I trust that I'm going to enjoy who he works with in general. I'm always happy to hear his tag. You know, the Honorable C Note.
I wish he got more attention.
Yeah, and it's just like, again, because when we talk about, you know, back when Dat Piff was huge, and that's where like all these trap mixtapes were happening. Like Honorable Cino is one of those guys who, if I saw that name on a track list, I knew, okay, I'm probably going to enjoy at least one song on this album, on this mixtape, 100%.
He seemed to fit under what you say about knowing how to make the music fit the artist, which I think is underlooked a lot.
Yeah, because, you know, some people are just like throwing beats out there. But if you're willing to be like, oh, this actually works well with this person, or works with have them, like, you know, it's like what like Honorable Cino would do with like Gucci Mane. You know, you hear something like that, and you're like, okay, all right.
You got a podcast too, right?
Yeah, I just started a podcast where you know, it's called Cabbages, just like the newsletter, and basically, you know, we're still kind of feeling around, having fun with it. We're not trying to be crazy serious with it. Like the newsletter could get serious and be really like knowledge and for the heads, but the podcast, it's just like, you know, there's a lot of really talented people out there doing podcasts about very serious topics in hip hop, and they own that space, and I think they're doing a great job. I'm not trying to do what they do. And then there's people who do the kind of thing that feels like a morning show on a hip hop station sort of stuff. And I'm not trying to copy them because like you got really, you know, big name talents doing those things. I'm trying to do something that's a little fun. I'm trying to give people something a little lighter. And the way that the format is right now, it's like me and my boy Jeff. We're just talking to rappers, you know, we're talking to them about stuff that isn't just music.
Right.
You know? So we're talking about fun stuff, and that's kind of the goal.
You know, that's one thing I like about Cabbages, like in your interviews, like I know when I would go to like media events, like I remember one time I went to like a Cool G rap thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like the lowest man on the totem pole, and I went last, but like we were all in the room together, right? So I heard everybody's set of questions, and it was basically like 8 questions, and they would all have like maybe a 9th or 10th. It was a little different, but it was like the same set over and over.
The thing is, that's a problem too, is that like if you ask artists the same questions all the time, they'll give the same answers, you won't get much out of it. So like I try with the newsletter questions in particular, it's like I only do 3 questions. I tailor them to each artist, and I try to make it such that like it's not just a yes or no answer, and it's not something that they get asked all the time.
Right, because I mean, like, how many people is gonna listen to like Freddie Gibbs? I love Freddie Gibbs, but you know, like nobody's listening to 35 Freddie Gibbs video interviews in an album release cycle. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So like, I feel like my goal is not necessarily to try to get, you know, all of that artist's fans to come over and listen to it. I want to get some of them to come over, but it's like, if you're somebody who reads the newsletter and cares about it and cares about hip hop, if I'm going to put somebody in front of you for an interview, you know, whether it's in the newsletter or in the podcast, I want to make it worth your while. I want to be different from what you read. If that same artist it goes and is on Complex or is on DJ Booth or somewhere else, I want it to be a different conversation.
Got you. And so I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but who are you looking at right now going forward that you think might have a strong come up going, let's say between now and 2025? Who's some young people to watch?
I mean, there's a lot of good people, and that's the beauty of it. I think Nappy Nina, she's from Oakland, but she's based here in Brooklyn right now, I think is doing incredible stuff, really like thought-provoking artist. I think she's hugely talented and is somebody who is going to have, like, we talk about 2025, I feel like you watch her over these years and see what she's going to do. I think she's incredible. I mentioned Spanish Ran before. I think Spanish Ran is going to be one of those producers who is going to end up working with some classic New York people.
Well, what's his highest like placement so far? Because that sounds familiar to me.
I mean, no, Spanish Ran, like he's not somebody who's doing like big projects. I mean, he's on some people's stuff, but like he's mainly doing his own thing. He's working with rappers that he messes with, and like that's somebody who I feel like at some point is going to get paid attention to. Like, you know, if like I feel like if like you put,
so he ain't like made no beef for Cormega or nothing.
No, I'm saying, but like if like let's say you had a new Terror Squad album, let's say, and you do some version of Terror Squad. He's the kind of person who, if you want the feel of that first Terror Squad record, he's somebody you could get for that. And I feel like, you know, it's like, yeah, if you want that Cool and Dre sound,
Bodega
like,
Bams.
Yeah, like I mean, Bodega Bams is an amazing artist, and he's worked with like hugely hugely talented people.
I feel like that first Bodega Bams mixtape is an all-time classic, and don't nobody know about it.
100%. And like every project he does, you know, strictly from my Poppy's on, like it's just great. It's just great.
That
and
first one though, man.
No, and all the Tanboy stuff is great, and the Tangirl stuff too. You know, like Bonnie B, who's in that crew.
Yeah,
Bonnie B is hugely talented.
You know, I ain't thought about them for a minute. What's been going on with them? Is that moving?
I talked to Bonnie B a few months back for the newsletter, and she's working on stuff. I know she's working with Terminology right now because she's posted that on Instagram. She's been doing stuff with Terminology, so I know we're going to get some good stuff out of that. She did a mixtape last year with 183rd, who is one of my favorite producers around here. He works.
I didn't know. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, 183rd works a lot with like people like Smoke DZA. He also does a lot of stuff with, you know, local rappers and producers that he cares, you know, local rappers that he cares about, people particularly uptown in Harlem and Bronx. He works with some great people, and you know, it's like,
yeah,
I know that somebody like Bonnie B, who's hugely talented, if you get her in a room with somebody like 183rd, you get incredible records.
Right.
You know, I'm excited to hear what she's going to do with Terminology, you know, because I feel like Term is somebody. Yeah, and the thing is, Term is somebody who I feel like, you know,
underrated.
He doesn't get the credit he deserves for how much amazing stuff he's done. And like, I feel like sometimes, you know, if you bring two people together, regardless of that generation, you know, regardless of where they are in their career, you might get that defining project. It's like when you put Gibbs and Madlib together, look what happened. You know,
right.
You suddenly had an artist who had been like sidelined. You know, you put him with a producer who's never been like a commercial success, but has always been like a critically acclaimed, beloved underground artist. And you put them together and you get one of the defining rap albums of the 2010s in Pinata. So like, there's so many opportunities for these kinds of permutations. Just artists have to be willing to work together and do something maybe outside of their comfort zones.
Word. I can dig it. Well, shit, I really appreciate talking to you. I would definitely love to have another conversation like this in the future. Like I said, I love talking to somebody who can tell me about stuff I never heard of.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, is like, you know, you're talking about your perspective, but, you know, on the South, I'm sure you'd be able to school me on tons of stuff with that. Like I had a very different experience. You know, I grew up here in New York, you know, but I had family down in Florida, and one of my family members was a DJ, a hip hop DJ in like the early 90s. And he turned me on to a lot of Southern stuff that we weren't getting up here. Like I learned about Ghetto Boys from him. You know, I learned all about, you know, Miami Bass, Two Live Crew and beyond, like, from him. Do
you remember when the Source used to have those maps in them, and they'd show like where a record was sold at? For all right, so you probably wouldn't have looked, but DC would always like Rap A Lot releases would do real good. Mm-hmm. You know, we definitely got everything from New York. We got Clue tapes and all that. You know, Everybody loved Nas. You know, we like Death Row. So like DC was a little more homogenous than most areas of you know. Rap was so territorial in the 90s. DC is one of the few places where we was just like, because we had Go-Go. So,
yeah, right.
So we didn't, like, Nonchalant was like our most famous rapper, or Mr. Servon, who was actually on No Limit. Mm-hmm. So, or Section 8 Mob, who probably don't know, ever even heard of. But so we was willing to listen to anything. So with me, it would just be what was good. And there was a lot of Bama's that could rap coming out of Houston. Just like, you know, there was a lot of people that could rap coming out of New York. It didn't really matter as long as it was good. And, you know, and earlier in the game, you know, more people up north was rapping, so it was more good rappers. But, you know, as it progresses, quality will come from everywhere, as it would in anything.
Absolutely, yeah. I dated a girl in the late 90s from DC, and like I didn't know about Go-Go before I started dating her. Like I had no frame of reference for it. It's just amazing what, you know. I'm trying to talk to her about freestyle. You know, I'm over here talking about, you know, TKA and stuff like that. Like it's like cultural exchange that happens when you get people talking. And, you know, that's a while back. You know, I'm not a 22-year-old kid, you know, as you can tell from the gray in my beard. And it's like, it's great to be able to talk to people now with the internet, conversations like this. We talk from different areas, and it's like my frame of reference and my touch points are different than your touch points. We'll have some common ground, but we'll come away from a conversation and learn something. and be interested in something and find out something else. I think that's the best thing about all of this, is the chance for this exchange that for years the industry wouldn't let us do, and technology didn't exist to help us to do it.
Yes, man. I can't say it no better than that. So before we get out of here, where can people find you? Where's the podcast? Where are you at on social?
Yeah, I mean, it's the newsletter's at cabbages.substack.com. The Cabbages Podcast is everywhere you get your podcast from. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Stitcher, it's on all of those. And you can find me on Twitter. It's at NoYokono, NoYokono. That's just a long time handle that I've used, and I've kept with that on there. So yeah, if you look me up, you'll find me in those places.
Well, thank you very much, brother, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
My fault, man. Shit.
Bob, what up? What up? Rusty Jokes, what's good, boy? Slash. Brownsville. We rap better out in Brooklyn. We stack cheddar out in Brooklyn. Everybody wanna know the secret to life. B from BK, my guy, that's why we rap better out in Brooklyn. We stack cheddar out in Brooklyn. Everybody wanna know the secret to life. B from BK, my guy, that's why.
Life is free, death comes with a price. And I ain't got time to take lame niggas' advice. My fam needs stability, and that's what I give them. I own the beat, but I'm a slave to the rhythm. You eat off the people, but you never give back now. Niggas wanna kill you where you used to live at. I am the block, so I can't never leave it. Put my homies in the light so they can taste it and breathe it. Now it's all about touring. Big money sponsors, not just America, the world I conquer. City on my back, soldiers in the front. Rap shit, street shit, tell me what you want. When I throw it at them light, it seems so heavy, like a bullet out the burner, it'll gleam so desi. Bold eagle, shoot the hair off your scalp. Letting bitches know what Vic Flair's all about.
So let me break it down. Where we rest is no joke.
Brooklyn.
Never taking shorts, cause Brooklyn's the bomb.
Rap shit, street shit, tell me what you want.
Where we rest is no joke.
Brooklyn.
Never taking shorts, cause Brooklyn's the bomb.
I'm on Livonia, street so cold, pneumonia, keep a grip on ya. On my corner, I'm Christ. Fuck with only niggas that's nice. R.I.P. Price. It's a price on my wig. Eat, sleep, shit with the sick. Reincarnation of big, it's lit. Ribs in the back, play tag for a minute. Now I do the black infinite, I'm authentic. Dennis, I'm smiling, even through the violence. My man got stretched, I'm riding. The sirens never stop, make a young nigga wanna wet a cop. Fed or rent a cop. Better not, better build, nigga. Everybody screaming they a real nigga. I'm just trying to chill, instead of kill. My own evil with the pills or with my chrome rap slide stone. Y'all know rap better out in Brooklyn. We stack cheddar out in Brooklyn. Everybody wanna know the secret to life. B from BK, my guy, that's why we rap better out in Brooklyn. We stack cheddar out in Brooklyn. Everybody wanna know the secret to life. B from BK, my guy, that's why.